All right, welcome to the community conversation for February. We have moved from the, sounds like we're in a board meeting, we have officially moved from the auditorium, which was cavernous, and to a more conversational space. So I hope that this is beneficial for the Shakespeare wrote, the happy few who are here today. As you guys all know, we're recording, and this is going to be put on our webpage and linked in future communications. So the topic today is twofold. Well, here's the purpose. Outreach. I did, Kat, appreciate your suggestions earlier to potentially move these to a more online format, so I'll just sort of say that for the record. I do know that Central's PTO does meetings that way, and we can certainly consider that. This is just, our first year and really only our fourth one of these total, so we can always make improvements. We now have almost a 2-to-1 administrator to community ratio, and that's great. A lot of questions to be answered. Potentially. So that's kind of where we are. Really, because we're so small that we can ask a lot of questions. I would though appreciate it if we kind of stay focused on our kind of 2 topics today. If we spread out into others, that's fine. But if we could stay focused, that would be appreciated. We have about an hour. I don't think it's going to take longer than that, given that we don't have very many people here, but maybe it will. But we have this meeting scheduled for about another 55 minutes. So. That's great. Oh, here we go. Come on in. Just so you guys are aware, this is the video line. So if you want to be on the video, these seats are videoing and those seats are more anonymous.
And you're putting it in the video?
I am.
Oh, thank you.
I do want to be fancy girl.
That's what we call being voluntold, I think.
Oh, come on, Mona.
So thank you guys for coming. So here are the 2 potential topics for today. The final exam process, and wanting to provide some updates and feedback on where we are with the curriculum alignment process as well. So that's kind of what we have planned. And just as I mentioned a little bit earlier, this meeting we will take notes and we will provide this group's questions and feedback to our PTAC group, which meets in a couple weeks, which some of you are actually on. So that would be a nice crossover. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive into some of the stuff that we have, and I will rely on some more seasoned administrators like Assistant Principal for Instruction at Central, Jessica Hurt, to provide some other pieces of information because she has the longest sort of internal history of some of these things. Let's start with the end in mind. So I just want to be clear, because I know that it came up when we talked about this at our board meeting last week, that this is a conversation not about eliminating final exams. That's not actually on the table. It's not something that we're going to recommend. What we do want to talk about, though, is how we can improve our final exam structure. It has been this way for many years. It fits with a very specific type of educational structure. But as we've learned, and I'll show you in a little bit from some of our colleges and universities that we reached out to, it is not necessarily the type of structure that all students will experience when they get to a college or university, right? So in an effort to make sure that we are doing the best job we can at preparing students for an academic future, we kind of want to take a look at, what final exams actually, like what kids actually do right now. So conversation today is designed to be informed by current data as well as college admissions officers from many of the schools that our students attend. We actually sent a survey out, I'll say it again later, but to over 200 schools, and 55 of them responded pretty quickly, and we'll show you what they said. So let's talk through this. Jess, do you want to kind of talk about this stuff? That would be awesome.
Sure. So big picture about final exams is that the expectation is that all students experience a final exam. And so what that means in that course. So outside of PE, where there's obviously some exceptions. Some other exceptions are spaces like a ceramics class or a cooking class where it'd be very difficult in 90 minutes to throw a piece, say in ceramics, right? Throw a piece, fire it, glaze it, fire it again, like those types of things are a little bit different. So thinking about this idea of how do we measure that cumulative acquisition of that content over the course of the semester. And so we have maintained, this is my 16th year in the district, we've maintained that 3-day schedule for final exams. So students, have that opportunity if they have 3 exams, we allow them to move them. Because again, we know that these can be high stakes, as if you see on there. We've moved towards, South has always had this, but Central moved to this a couple of years ago. I'm looking around the room like anybody, like I would be able to jog my memory.
Sure.
To that final exams count for between 10 and 20% of a student's final grade. And so it used to be always 20%. But then South was doing it, we took a look, we actually spent a lot of time, Eric Martzoff and myself, with the final exam committee that was in, what year, I can't remember, 2019, 20. We took a look to see what's happening around the area. So really opening that up. And so we also removed seniors, their second semester final exams. And so we think about those students, we have given them finals a bunch of years, we're preparing them, and students reporting to us that it was just this terrible way to end high school, they have AP exams, all these kinds of things. And so we had a huge group that was made up of community members, students, faculty, administrators, and so that was the removal for seniors, but only second semester. So that's kind of like that long trajectory. But again, that thought that all courses are expected to give a final exam, but there is latitude in what that looks like per the content area. So not every student is sitting down writing essays for 90 minutes. Not every student is sitting down doing multiple choice. Sometimes it can be projects, sometimes it can be presentations. But again, that idea of that cumulative acquisition of that content and how you're demonstrating that understanding.
And those 3 days, one first day has 3 exam periods.
3, and then 2 and 2, but then makeup period. So we allow, like I said, we allow students to, if they do have 3 finals, they can go through the process with the dean's office to move that, because we want to be cognizant of students just having a lot to study for, right? And we think about how colleges do, final exams are spread across, and so we want to make sure that we're not saying, okay, you have these 3 high pressure exams going back to back to back. That would obviously not be fair as we're building those skills among students.
So really, just kind of from the perspective of, I know that some of you, currently have and/or used to have and/or will have children in the district. These are just some kind of questions that we're interested in hearing about your opinions. Like, what are some of the benefits you see in our current structure? What are some of the challenges that maybe your children have or you have seen in the structure that we currently have? And really just sort of this overarching general question. Hi, welcome.
Sorry for late.
No, not at all. I know we changed rooms last minute. We were trying to make it a little cozier. Please come on in.
Wow.
I know. Yeah, who would have thought? Come on in. We are forward more than Matt said.
I measured you guys now.
Okay, start over.
No, so really just thinking about, like, from your perspective, from the perspective of your experiences as a parent with children that either have gone through, are going through, will go through, just kind of want to hear your feedbacks about the benefits and challenges of the current structure that we just laid out for final exams, and really kind of what your general thoughts are about the purpose of this final exam experience. And I just kind of use this to lay a foundation for the discussion today. This is what the industry calls wait time.
So then, for seniors, second semester, if finals are waived, do they still have the option to take them?
They do not.
No.
So their grade is whatever it is
Yes.
when it comes up to final exams. Do you think that it's possible to give them the option to take them? The only reason why is, there are 2 things. One, it keeps them engaged, and it also will be, gives the educator an opportunity to think about comprehension for that semester, but also it allows the student to possibly raise their grade, or, I hate to think of it that way, but it is the truth, right? But they still have the option to not.
Yeah, I mean, cause we did take when that exam, that study group, we brought up a lot of those cost benefit, right? And so, you know, on the discipline side, like using, assessment as, you know, carrot versus stick, right, when it comes to that classroom management side, those are things that came up.
And some kids may just opt to take them anyhow because they wanna keep sharp or, I mean, it's their disposition. And we have to praise and kind of support everyone, right?
There also was the issue, right, I believe of the practicality of it, is that seniors actually graduate before final exam period occurs.
Oh.
So really not having a second semester, prior to, if I remember what you told me correctly, there was a special senior exam
Yeah,
period.
correct.
That was prior to everyone else's.
So they would actually take truncated finals, so because they were done in those 50-minute periods. So they were not taking the same final that their peers would take in a mixed class per se.
So just to stay up with the discussion, are we thinking this is for all grades or possibly a change just for seniors?
No, really, this is just sort of a feedback session about the idea of final exams in general. We would like to, if there is room for improvement, to improve the process. And I made the suggestion that we would improve it in order to make sure students are as prepared as possible for whatever comes next, right? So we want to make sure that whatever we think are benefits of our current system and our current structure actually lead to those types of outcomes. So if you're suggesting something different for seniors or for freshmen or whomever,
I just
Let's put
wasn't
it out
sure if
there.
that was even mentioned yet. I just, because I think the idea of maybe some seniors wouldn't find it as helpful, but I think the idea with having them at a minimum optional is it gives parents a chance to weigh in. Because if you just blanketly say, we're not gonna do finals, then we're not gonna do finals. If they're at a minimum optional, then parents may say, guess what, kid, you're taking them.
so yeah, our conversation is not about eliminating finals.
Okay,
At all, no, that
Thank you.
was in the
That's
previous
what-
slide,
okay.
right? But our current structure does not have second semester finals for seniors, that's what we were referring to.
Okay,
And that has not been the case since 2018, that decision was made at that point in time.
honestly, for as much as they are stressful, having two sophomores and seeing what they're going through, I think having them helps build that path. My son just took midterms last week and this week, and and he had the option to go away for the weekend with friends, and I had a conversation with him just briefly, just like, hey, you're on your own. I know how you felt about this and that, make a decision. He chose to stay back and work and prepare and do well for the finals. So,
Yeah,
So
I
we can
like
make the assumption
option.
that that was because he had experiences doing that in the past as well. And
yeah,
saw the benefit of
and
it.
understanding what it took to get to that, like how many hours do I have to plan for these classes? And without that experience, I don't know how they know how to plan.
Every time they'll say, you need to train your final exam muscles.
Yeah, and I don't know, like I know someone, and I don't know if it was in your presentation, like some classes, I think it was business law, or one of them did a project of some sort. I like that idea for some classes, because I think in that case, they gain more from a project. I don't know that finals have to be for every class, but I would say the core classes for sure. But I wouldn't wanna see projects for more than maybe one. I still think the idea of the finals is key to their learning.
Full disclosure, I don't know a ton about the final exams or whatever, but can we move them to before Christmas break?
So we are, they are moving
Yeah,
back.
this is an anomaly because of the construction.
It
Yeah.
was,
Yes.
got
We have not had finals after break for a long time.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
it was, yeah,
Because
so.
we had the COVID year,
Yeah,
so it's like the
17.
first time we actually sat for finals and it was after.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
brilliant.
so it has not been for a decade or so, yeah, so
It will be
happy
a
to,
piece of every calendar discussion we
Yeah.
have internally and externally, that we have semesters that are broken up by the breaks.
Yes.
Check.
All right, see you later.
The only thing is, I think that fundamentally, with regards to the seniors, or really all the kids for all 4 years, it's like fundamentally more choice, not less. Do you know that it, so in terms of finals and seniors not taking finals, second semester, there should be, it would be great if there was an option, and then if nobody takes it, the next year, if you're able to do it or whatever, then you know it's not really a thing.
It
But-
can help some kids.
It really
The
can.
final can actually dig a kid out of something that happened.
Yeah, we have some data on that too, that we can share just from what we've seen in the last few years. You know, the only thing that I feel like I just need to add from a really practical standpoint, when you start talking to teachers of multi-level groups, which are most of our electives, many of our languages, et cetera, many of our math classes, you have, you would have to create multiple final exams, right? Some for seniors, some for others, and keeping in mind that the senior format's probably gonna be shorter than the other format. So there are some pieces to it that are practical considerations that go into creating options like that. They're not unable to be overcome, they
Right.
just have to be considered.
Yeah.
Well, and the teachers have handled that in the past quite well. My children did it, and I have to go back to what are we trying to accomplish?
Mhm.
By having kids, by educating children, aren't we getting them to do their adulting thing?
Mhm.
You know, we're trying to help them become good global citizens, adulting, going on, you know, knowing what, you know, life's not gonna be fair, life's not gonna be easy, sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. So you have, I think, what are you trying to accomplish? Because final exams, if you go out to the workplace, you have a final exam probably every day of your life in work. Your boss doesn't say, well, if you do the one on Monday, I'm not gonna require the one on Thursday. And especially as seniors, I don't understand the recommendation back in 2018 for the 2019 end year of the rationale, what was in the mindset of the superintendent at the time, of how all seniors, why not, you know, there are seniors that would not benefit from a final exam, and giving them an option would have, to me, I would have leaned into that, instead of just saying all seniors don't have to do. So,
You could also potentially have it be by a date certain, they would need to notify the teacher that they do wanna take the final, so that they have time to prepare if they need to modify the test questions. And then, I'm envisioning it would be kids who are taking a year off and need their senior year grades, or kids who are waitlisted and need to submit their senior year grades. And if you don't have a full final exam, there could be like a truncated version to give them the credit. I do think that 7 semesters of regular old final exams does teach students, and that are totally consistent for pretty much all academic classes, worth 10 to 20% of the grade is the regularly occurring practice that students need to get themselves to be able to perform for college
Yeah.
when the stakes are higher and the final exams are maybe worth a little bit more,
Yeah.
and beyond to grad school.
Thanks for bringing that up. We actually had a bridge in between because it was a 2-year study group for the senior final exams. So we actually did an opt out of finals. We actually talked about opt-in, to your point. And so we did that as that first step, and like less than 1% of students opted to take their final exams. So we
Wow.
did try to use that data.
well,
And so
of course, kids go for, they're like water. They're gonna opt
But if
out.
it's gonna help you, I mean, I don't even know why you wouldn't just hold it the regular exam period and just hold their diploma. We used to get our diplomas mailed to us in this district. I mean, it's not gonna be a ton of kids, but, you know, if there is a final that's gonna help them, they would be willing probably to take it at the same time to alleviate having to make 2 exams, you know.
Jessica, do you remember what the rationale was to eliminate finals?
Yeah, so, and I was actually trying to find our old slide deck. So a big part was, to your point, and I apologize, I don't know your.
I'm Mona.
Hi, Mona, nice to meet you. And so, I think it was a couple of different reasons. So, huge demand, by actually both parents and students around just the stress that it was, around students. You know, so we had students who, there's just too much, like accumulation, and we know that, like, getting feedback, right? They have already, most of those students already know what school they're going to or what their post-secondary plans are. And we actually, there's a lot of data around finals don't actually make a lot of difference in students' grades, right? So when students, I think there was a groundswell, so it actually was coming from students, not from adults, right? Because, again, like, those are, you know, a large constituent group for educators, right? So it was this groundswell, so there have been lots of editorials written in our newspapers, lots of students demanding it, student council, I remember going to student council multiple times around it. Lots of area schools actually have different situations, so they might have a friend who goes to XYZ school and they're like, hey, how come those seniors don't have to do it, but we have to do it, we're being held to a different standard. So there was this groundswell, and that's why we created that exploratory committee to start looking at it. And so we had, you know, parents, there were students, community members, administrators, teachers, all these people that were on this group to take a look at it. So fundamentally, it was about buckets of the amount of stress and anxiety it was causing, to what end, right? What is the actual benefit of that? To, we've tested 7 semesters, we have proven that we have learned that skill. What is that next thing going to be? You can make an argument that every unit exam is, and every summative is high stakes in District 86. And then there was that third part of, if it's not even gonna impact our grade, why are we even doing it? So I think that's why that original bridge was, okay, students opting into taking their finals, and then taking a look at that data. So definitely it was coming from the students. No adult was pushing an agenda as to what was happening.
Well, if you remember, or if it's part of your records, I would love to watch the presentations and the board presentations and all of that. So if you would share those dates with me, I'll go back and look. Just so I can see, your explanation I thoroughly appreciate, but it's just wanna frame it a
Yeah,
little bit
there
too.
were no finals in 2016, there were no finals in in 1983 either. I mean, we seem to go through cycles of whether we do it or we don't do it, and it would be interesting to,
Yeah.
like, look at historically, when did we offer, or when do we require seniors to take finals second semester? That would be a great data point.
I've never, that was up until, there was, I think, the anomaly with like snow days, and it was that we were referencing in
2016, Lindsay had none. No finals. But she had AP classes, so maybe the AP test took place.
I was just gonna mention that as a
Yeah.
data point, like, cause may you have APs, I mean, especially for seniors, you tend to have more APs.
We also, as someone who taught AP Gov, which is a senior AP class, I always gave my students a final. They took their May exam, and then they also had a final
Right.
exam for my class.
So to the point about
They've always been
stress,
required.
they're doing some prepreparation for every test, so like,
Exactly, yeah.
that pattern isn't broken for many seniors are gonna be in
Yeah.
APs, and multiple.
Let me
That
add a
would be
new
interesting.
data
Okay.
set to our conversation, just so that, and we can wrap our heads around this in conjunction with what's already been said. So this was in 2017, this is part of the slide deck that you're asking for, which we can dig up. But this was the data that was presented, that there was no impact on the final course grade for 83% of all tests taken at South and 82% of all tests taken at Central. Right, so that was what the findings were, and really, when we talked about, like, so you have a semester grade, which is called a marking period grade, then you have a final exam, and then you have a semester grade. So those are the two pieces that lead to the semester grade. When you looked at the marking period, which is the entire semester, and then you looked at the final exam, right? There was no change for 83% of the students at South for all tests and 82 at Central. So that's what was one of the findings in 2017.
So, but was the weight, the same across the?
Well, the weight may have been more 20% at Central, but it was still, would have been on the sliding scale here in this
20,
one.
okay, and then here.
So what was the impact for the 18 and 17%?
We have
Right.
that next, here we go.
Very good.
Of course we have that, right? This is what it was this last year. So this was what it was in 2017, and this is what it was in this last year. So there was no impact for 92% of all grades at South and 94% at Central. Okay, so that's just as a comparison.
Reading scale?
This is, well,
Yeah, because now it could be 90-10, it could be,
right, but it could have been all of that before too.
well, not at Central, it was 80-20 in the last.
I'm sorry, the
No, that's
90-10s
different.
don't account for any of that. The grading changes don't account for the
The weight of the
the weight of the
finals.
final.
The
Right.
what, weight of the finals, that problem.
So, what was the impact on grades that made a difference? So, here's what we saw, okay, for this last go around. 4% of grades at South went up. This is the 8%, okay? 4% went down. At Central, 3% went up and 3% went down.
Is that for the current year?
That is for this last exam period, yeah. To look at it in a different way, this was 2021, the end of last year, and then the next slide is going to be the end of this last given semester. So marking period's on the left, and the total semester grade is above. So what the green box is indicating is the most frequent, or like the highest percentage. So what this is saying is that if you had an A going into the final, 97% of students with an A kept an A. 3% got a B. If you had a B going into the final, 88% kept a B, 8% got an A, so it did go up, and 4% got a C, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's second semester of last year. And if you can keep that image in your mind, it's pretty similar. This is what happened just a month ago. Okay, so 96% who came in with an A left with an A, but 4% went down. The biggest difference you might see here is in the very last column. That 70% that went in with an F, 23% came out not failing the class. It was 19% the year before, right? So, one might make the argument that you keep final exams just for the kids who are really on the bubble too. Not just for them, but like it affects them in a pretty large way, right? It's sort of, I don't want to say that they stored up all their energy for the end, but like pulling it out in the end with a better than average performance on the final exam may have been something that was helpful. So anyway, this is something to look at. This is also the type of chart, and I'm not saying this is a recommendation, so I'm being really careful, but I just want to put it out there in the ether. This is the type of data that some schools that have eliminated finals for students who had A's or made them optional have used this type of data, right? To say, listen, if you have an A in the class, it is your option to take the final, or you can focus on something else, right? Because we have at least 2 years, and actually we have quite a few more, that the final exams are making less impact, particularly at the high grade levels.
Are you speaking just about second semester senior year as an option, or are you speaking about any
I think we should probably make sure we are letting kids take finals in a traditional fashion most of their high school career, but it is something that could be considered at some point in time. Right? I don't know when that is, and maybe the table can weigh in on that. But no, I am not making the suggestion that we let every freshman who has an A not take a final.
No.
Right, that's not what I'm saying. Right. Okay, so there we have those. So here's a little bit more granular data, and then we'll have a chance to look back or talk about all this. So here's by grade level, and it's pretty consistent. So in 9th grade, 92% of all finals had no impact. 10th grade, 91%, 11th grade, 92%. So it's not as if we are seeing freshmen and sophomores and juniors performing differently on finals as far as the impact of their final grades. This is 21-22. Here is last semester by subject, the core subjects anyway. In English, it made less impact than in math, science, and social studies. Not by a ton, but that's what we're seeing. This one we thought was really interesting, and I asked Mr. Bonamy to actually highlight that 10 in our slide deck here. I guess I could have done it myself, but so this is English and math, right? Well, he was a former math guy, and he's like, this is really interesting for us as math folks to think about. English regular level, so not AP, not honors. 94% no impact, 3 went up, 3 went down. 3 went up, 2 went down in English honors. Math regular, 10% went down and only 2 went up.
That's that's the 80-20, 20% for your final in math has been pretty much traditional. I think the other departments probably have swapped
So
it.
this is across the whole district.
Right.
This is not just a central piece of data. But it's then vice versa, or at least is opposite for the benefits for those in honors and AP.
Yeah.
So it's something just I don't know what this tells us, but I think it's worth just like adding to the conversation. That at least in regular level math, the students there is more of a decline. And this could be different year over year. We don't have a lot of, but you're right, yes, it is cumulative.
Math is so cumulative. And English was mostly projects, like the things I remember.
No.
Lindsay did projects, presentations.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
No, I mean, in AP English last year, grant, so that was regular English, not lit. There was a lot of papers.
Yeah.
Lots of, articles and papers and research
At the
and
very end for finals?
Yeah.
Wow.
They're mostly stimulus based. I actually don't know a ton of English classes that
I-
have projects.
would read
Wow.
some of the stuff that, my daughter would be like, here, you wanna tell me whether or not this article is biased or not. She would quiz me on it. That was tough.
Yeah, so the
And so they did a lot of, to your point, the stimulus. I just want to ask really quick, on the slide that showed the 77% for the Fs, when you talk about stress of finals, of having them, equally, I would imagine kids who are faced with an F are really stressed, and maybe the idea of a final is a way to get rid of some of that stress by working toward.
It's forgiveness. I mean, it's like an opportunity
Is
to
forgiveness?
show what you can do,
Well-
as opposed to be graded on what you got up until then.
I think it's an opportunity, maybe. I don't know how, maybe our psychologists here in the room can talk about it more, but I don't know what opportunity that really provides. Does it help with stress or does it make it worse? That's the one advantage I thought of if we really targeted that group on my version of an opportunity.
And I think they're stressed too on the opposite side of
Yeah.
kids who have A's who are stressing about losing that A, coming into a final that's worth 20% of their grade, when they performed well all year long to have one test, sink that to even to a B, which is still a great grade, but for them it's not. And that I think is a fundamental issue. I have personally, I don't have any issues with finals, I think it does prepare them for colleges. It's the big percentage weight that is tied to finals. And the stress that causes, at least on the younger age of high school kids that I have, and friends with, that is the stressor of that. They don't feel it's fair that one exam should be worth that much of the grade when they have busted their butt all year long and have proven themselves to be, capable of the content and experience in the class, to then, having the stress of having finals and studying, cramming for, a whole semester's worth of information, to then be dinged on that at the end. It's a different perspective.
I think this goes back to the summative formative debate that's sort of raging amongst this district right now, which is that in my personal view, I think that formative is critical for high school students, and I think that they should be graded on it, and I think that that's why it teaches them all the pieces of the puzzle. Law school is where you get to eventually, where your whole grade is based on it's 80% the final. And that you should already have known how to manage your days and your weeks, and those skills need to be embedded in you, not by some magic and it's not something that's innate. It could be innate to some children, which is wonderful for them, but it needs to be part of the process of learning how to study, and formative is critical for that. It's so critical. Starting as a freshman, the kids are not mature enough to understand just to study for summative. It is stressful. I think it's just beyond the pale to not have like all the small moments that you were putting into effort for the class be like completely worth it and like valued by the process. I think it's essential. And then you move on in your educational career, and then each piece of it gets more stressful at the end, as it should be, because that's teaching you something for real life. But I just think it's like, you don't know how to, you learn how to study, and you learn how to become a smart student as far as the logistics of being a student by having the formative pieces count.
May I ask you a specific question about that?
Mhm.
What would be your thought on how much value should be put on that formative part of the, let's say, a final outcome?
So my children are a little younger, so I have not had this experience. I've heard people talk about where they say, oh, okay, I have this and I have to do this math calculation about what my grade needs to be. So it's hard for me to sit and see the percentages exactly, but I do see like a 15%-ish final to be reasonable, where it can't totally tank you, and like, but I do feel like the rest of it is, I almost would say equally split between summative and formative, but I don't know for sure. I'm not an educator, I haven't been grading classes, I don't know exactly how the pieces should fit together, but it has to be at least a third, I would say, like total of the total percentage into just all the small pieces. What you guys call, I have a difficult time understanding what people are calling summative and formative, but what I'm envisioning is formative.
Okay.
Like 20 to 30% seems reasonable, and it's like participation. I want my kid to get up in class. My kids always get my common feedback I get from teachers is, he's doing so well, he's great, he's got it all down, he just needs to speak up in class. And I want somebody to tell him it matters. Like, I don't want it to be like, if left to his own devices, he may never speak up in class, you know?
Sure.
So I think it's important for them to have that push.
I wrote these 3 very generic questions. I don't know if any of them would stir anyone to comment, but I'm actually, and I don't want to put you on the spot, so I won't. I'll look away when I say it. But what you were suggesting earlier sounded almost like a version of a suggestion about final exams, and that's what I'd love to hear from this group. Is there anything about this data or about this conversation that would suggest specific ways that we as a district should consider revising our final exam practices? And please note, for the video, I did not say eliminate our final exam practices.
So I think what would be helpful in the data
Sure.
is, you've got grade, final grade, what about percentage on the exam? Because I think we're gonna see most kids do probably pretty close, unless, there are extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
I think that's a more important data point than
Sure.
what the change was.
Mhm.
I mean,
So future data to potentially lay out also what exam percentage grades are?
yeah,
Yeah.
how much did it make a difference? Because like, you can go back and go, oh, well, it counted for 10%, so like, you had to get twice as high to bump it, or, twice as bad to drop it down. I mean, the actual numbers are probably more valuable than the grades in the end.
I shared that story. I'm not sure how public it was when I was talking about this, but that I was sitting next to a student during a walkthrough with Bill Walsh, and she was calculating using a conversion program that are pretty readily available to figure out exactly what she had to get on final exams. And
Well, they all do.
well, and
I
no,
did.
Teachers used to tell you what you need.
well, and they all know. I just wonder what that column that you're suggesting would actually show us. Like, I wonder how many, and this is me just being curious, I wonder how many students who have an A score far lower than an A, but just high enough to keep the A on their final
Oh, they
exam.
do.
That would be kind of an
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah,
thing
which is
to
a
see.
skill, right? Like we want
Right.
our students to
It is.
figure out
Yes.
what
Yeah.
bucket to put their time, like if
Well,
I.
and they do that in college.
Sure, and that's an important skill.
We do that in
I
life.
got this.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
Yes,
is again,
that's
a skill,
important.
it's an important skill. But that also skews data, right?
Yeah.
It skews data, but it's important to
But
data
it's still
also.
important to consider.
No, for
To
sure, right?
understand.
Yeah, for sure.
Cause that's what you tell your kid, I mean,
Yeah.
my kid
I
was
used to
like,
just do it in
oh,
class.
I have
We do
to
it as a
get a
group.
30% to drop my grade, so I'm not even gonna study for this, I mean,
Yeah.
And
like,
that's a reward of the work that you put in to be in that position.
yeah.
And I do think it's important that these kids do understand, I have this job to do called school. The most important project I have right now are these 2 classes out of the 4. So where am I going to devote more of my time? That's a life skill set. And then they're still going to have opportunity where they build on that in college, because you don't get the curve, at least not for my son, he got I think I was telling one of you that he got an 89.9 in his class, and he got a B, and there's no B pluses, and it just, but for my son, that helped him make the decision to not go away on the weekend, to work hard, so it's like, you still got opportunity to improve on those skills before you have to be out there.
So you just mentioned the pluses and minuses, so like, they used to sit on your report card, I know they weren't calculated into your GPA, but like, it mentally did something to you, like, getting the plus and the minus, what was the rationale for eliminating them this year, or last year? Last year is
Yeah,
what they were.
they were never common, they were dependent on the course. So it wasn't something that we eliminated or fortified, it was just, we said, we're just gonna make everything the same and not have them.
Okay.
Right, so they didn't exist in some departments, but they did exist in other departments.
It's like teacher
And
dependent.
some of them started at 96, some of them started at 98, some of them were at 99. There was nothing common about the pluses and minuses.
So I know
So we
there's
just
lots
said-
of discussion
Yeah.
about it. I mean, I do think
Mhm.
that, like, getting that little plus on there helps a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, psychologically, it does, and like, interesting to talk to the kids about that. Would that be something that matters to them? Cause I bet it does, and, then instead of having everybody willy-nilly doing whatever they want, set like 98 and up is, you get the, you get
From a
plus.
pure psychological standpoint,
Yeah.
like not with a grade.
Well, maybe
Grade-
we
a
should do a
GPA
grade,
change.
so other districts do the GPA change.
They used to do that here. They,
Yeah, back long ago, yeah, but,
we used to have B pluses and B minuses in the GPA here.
yeah,
in the 90s.
They had a different calculation.
yeah, they did.
Yeah, 4.7, 4.2,
Money, you were Hinsdale Central.
94.
Yeah.
Yeah, they counted when I was like in the dark ages, sorry.
Yeah.
Can I show you what some of our stuff is from the college people? Okay, so some of you may have seen this at the last meeting, and I just added it in here just as a reminder of how many of our kids are going to college. So if one wanted to make the argument that we don't need finals because we don't have enough kids who need to be prepared for college, it's just flatly not true.
Yeah.
So we have about 87% or more of our students attending a 2 or 4 year school or trade school in their first year out of school. So we are talking about almost 90% of our entire student body is going to go on to a post-secondary educational experience. So that's what we're talking. That's a rationale for making sure that we have a lot of college-ready dispositions. So this is what we asked. It's kind of a couple simple questions. So 55 responded. They were a mix of private and public schools. All the ones that responded were 4-year schools, though, just so to be clear. 98% said, when asked, do you have a final exams week, said yes. Right, and then the others that did respond, you can see there, if you can't read that, I'll just read it out loud. More like a final project week. Rarely exams, presentations, essays typically due during this week. So sort of like a culminating week for a few of them. Really, I don't think I can do it on this. It's not because it's a copy. It would give me a percentage if I was on the live screen. Okay, and then what is your best estimate of the percentage of courses at your institution that have a final exam? And you can see that of the responses, and for those that can't read it, about 11% said, sounds like fuzzy math, but 11% said that 100% of their courses have a final exam. The most often responded though, response was 75% of courses. Like 50% of them said that 75% of their courses have a final exam, and then there are various other pieces in between, right? And then the next, well, the second highest answer was about 16% said that about 50% of their courses had final exams, right? So this is, and then all those other colors are just variations in between, right? So that was a little bit of what they showed us just quantitatively. Qualitatively, they wrote these things, and I pulled out what I considered to be the comments that were repeated most often. So anything you see here was something that at least 2 or 3 of the respondents said. I just left in the actual language of the most descriptive of them. So I'll give you a chance just to kind of read those. If anyone is not able, I can read it out loud too if you want, but I tried to make it big enough. There's a second page of this too, so I'll give everyone a minute.
Totally agree with the last sentence.
But we don't have to worry about that
We
since
do
it's not
not.
being considered.
We're not considering eliminating them.
Just
Not on the table right now.
Change the headline.
Just clarifying.
Why are we considering revising? I don't know. Okay. Why are we considering revising? Like, why, it seems like
Mhm,
it's great to get feedback and have a conversation,
mhm.
but if the district really isn't moving, then,
Well, I think we should, with something as big and important as final exams, every few years take a look at what our practices are.
okay, so we're just
Yeah,
reassessing,
I mean,
that's all.
this is a big part of a student's year. And we right now take 6 full school days, 6 days to do final exams, right?
It's,
Are we worried about
Yeah,
those
teacher-student time?
3 each semester.
Oh, okay,
right?
so 6
So
for the year.
6 full school days. Of our 180 days, we spend 6 days doing just exams.
Are we worried about teacher-student time? Is that part of?
Well, I will tell you that there are some departments that, and if you come to the PTAC meeting in 2 weeks, there are some departments that say, I would much rather have more instructional time,
Okay.
right? And give me less time for final exams, or make it so that it's like a normal school day, and everyone can give a final, but I can assign a project. Like, we have individuals inside of the organization that are saying that we've had a structure in place that is very traditional, and they're not saying let's get rid of it. They're saying let's take a look at what our practices are to make sure that we are fully providing an experience that is coherent with students' post-secondary experiences.
Not to be provocative
I'll
with
let
this
y'all read
question.
this while we're talking, but yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Like I said, not trying to poke the bear at this, but
Mhm.
how long are early release Wednesdays going to continue?
Yeah, 'cause that's
And I
more
mean
defined.
it as an honest, it is something I feel a little contention around. However, that's not why I'm asking.
Mhm.
It's because if teachers are saying we need more instructional time, then how long are these going to last?
Can I tag on
That's our
to that?
6 days.
What was the original intention of these half early release days? Because my understanding was to allow students to do makeups as well as teachers to, have their meetings and things like that. In my experience this year, my son has had teachers out of their classroom, I think more than they have been in the classroom because they have meetings. So if the goal of teachers is to teach, their job should be in the classroom first and foremost, and then other meetings, curriculum alignment is one of the things we've heard, whatever it is. There's one particular teacher who's been out more than, I wouldn't say more than they're in, but it has become a running joke with the kids, and they're having a contest to see how often she's going to be there. And it's not that she's not working, it's not that she's personal absences or anything like that, but that's what I struggle with. And you say, well, let's go into final exams. Well, they're not prepared, their teacher's not there all the time. And they're not available to meet with them. It's like, okay, just do what you gotta do. So, yeah, that's why I asked tagging on the early release days, because that's what I thought that intention was, to give those teachers that time during the school day
Collaboration.
to do those meetings, to have those meetings. But when teachers are being pulled out of the regular school days for these meetings, I have an issue with that, because they get paid to teach my child and they're not there doing that.
Well, and so the only other thing is, Chris, when you gave the academic report, which again, I told you then, I'll tell you now, I love the 63 pages worth of stuff. You probably didn't enjoy it, but I do like it, and I appreciate the work that went into it. We talked about learning loss as opposed to learning recovery, and the district's disposition is that there is a COVID learning recovery process, right? And the only way to support and remedy that learning recovery is more through instructional hours, right?
Or support hours.
Or support hours, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kid time, like kid support time, whether it's in the classroom or it's with, interventionists or social workers and stuff. It's really important to, in order to alleviate parental angst and community angst, and build trust and move forward together for the students of the district, we need to communicate clearly, because I'll be totally honest with you. In following the district and the cadence for meetings and, committees and so on and so forth, it's really it's not difficult to understand where the district is going before the district actually says it, based upon the meetings and the topics and the conversations.
Correct.
And I understand why, because you're collecting data, so on and so forth, to support whatever the disposition or the initiative is. So we can already see, that's why people are here, like, yeah, we're not sure that we like the way this is going. So rather than discuss in small pieces and kind of just say what it is, and ask for honest feedback and partner with the community so that you don't get the crazy pushback at the end, and we can feel like we're part. There's no reason, we're not toddlers, you don't have to kind of hide us from what's happening, just tell us. Do you know what I mean? Just tell us. And that's a problem. I enjoy spending, going to multiple committee meetings with you and your wealth of information, but I can already see kind of where it's going, just because we've had 2 years together, I understand why the topics are what they are, and the sequence that it goes in order to then bring it to the board, right? So.
Is there a specific there related to finals, or is there something underlying?
Or early release Wednesdays.
Early release.
Yeah,
I
I
just,
think-
I
I'm sorry, I was trying to-
instructional time, just give us our Wednesdays back.
But before you answer that, I just wanted to tack on, I appreciate this is what, the third community meeting you've had, or fourth?
Fourth.
Sorry,
Yeah.
and I have not been able to make them. I've tried to watch meetings, I try to keep up, but there's a lot. And, so I appreciate, Chris, ever since you came here, one of the first things we talked about was how to gain trust in the community. And so to your point, I think what you're doing, Jess, and everyone who's here, I think that it's critical to gaining what it is that you seek by doing these things. So not to put you on the spot, but I think this is a good thing. It's just the questions may be tough.
Yeah, no, I would only anticipate tough questions, that's the job, and I appreciate that. I am going to provide you an extraordinarily cop-out answer about early releases, because I can't say anything other than it is part of the negotiation process right now.
So
Right,
bingo.
And
Bingo.
that is not
That's
something
right.
that I can really comment on, especially in a public setting.
Right.
Right. I can tell you though, that one of the things that we talk about all the time is how we're going to create a calendar that will increase instructional minutes. Right, so you've heard me say that a few times in meetings, right? And what I'm sharing today is part of and you said there's a lot of meetings. There are also all the meetings that so all of our teachers are currently in this building somewhere engaged in curriculum-based meetings right now, right? So, and this is an early release Wednesday.
So thanks for being with us instead.
Yeah. So, so while early release Wednesdays are not a topic of conversation that I can talk about right here,
Yeah.
right? I can talk about the need for instructional time, and I said it before, like as a little bit of a like tongue-in-cheek, but support time too, right?
Right.
So one of the things that we've said very publicly is that the type of school day that we have allows for very little time outside of class for students to seek support that they wanted to. And to be really clear, the initial early release Wednesday proposal for these longer Wednesdays, like 15 times during the year, was not necessarily focused on students, right? There are student advantages because of this time in the afternoon. Like right now, we have 50 kids upstairs doing SAT prep, that we would not have done otherwise other than on a Saturday or outside of the school day or something like that. So there are some advantages, right? But they were designed primarily for teachers to gain some collaboration time, right? And we've been very clear that that time will shrink as we get to a point in some of our initiatives, like that curriculum alignment stuff you said, and that's, by the way, the second part of this presentation that I would love to also share with you at some point in the near future. But and that work is being done. You're right, teachers are still pulled out of class. That is a reality, it's happening. It is happening.
Some more than others.
It
It's
means
some-
you've got a really good teacher though, if you've got somebody who's being pulled.
But to the drawback of students, I mean, their
Yeah.
number one job isn't curriculum alignment, it's to teach the children. And
Yeah.
they're suffering because of all of these meetings.
And it's it's so counterintuitive. It's like what is the point of doing a curriculum alignment when there's these years of kids falling through cracks, like,
But
and
that
not
should
being
be happening
taught.
on those early release days, because that was what I
That was-
assumed was the
What's
case
the-
of
Yeah.
why we were
We're
doing
doing
them, was to not take teachers out of the
Yeah.
classroom, to have those times on set days to have those meetings. So if we're having all these other meetings still and having early release days, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Chris?
Where's the
Well,
timeline
what
for
it it's-
the curriculum alignment
It's in
process?
2 slides.
That's not.
Oh, it's coming.
That's
back.
actually the whole second part of this, is to talk about where we are with that. I didn't mean that in a
No, that's
in a
fine.
bad way.
No, it's
And to be honest with you, it's not necessarily about them doing extra work. It's just there's a lot of work. There are a lot of courses. Many have already been sort of, we'll just call it touched, and there are many that are sort of in the pipeline. Just want to be.
I think that's a whole other topic,
Yeah.
based on all the
Yeah,
feedback
but
I've seen. Based on what I've seen in the community, that goes to a lot of other discussions that are going on, so I think we can get back to that. I think the only thing I wanna point out here
Yeah.
is the about 75% of the faculty comment,
Mhm.
that only half do cumulative and the other half do normal unit exams. That's an interesting point.
That's in college.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but the reason why they solicited that input was about prepping our students for college, so in this particular case, and I believe you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this was said multiple times, but you used the most specific
Yeah.
point on this slide.
At least twice. I don't want to insinuate that this was said like 4 or 5 or 6 times, but yeah, that's probably accurate.
It's just an interesting point to take, because the exams, the final exams are all cumulative from my understanding, so it's just interesting to hear some colleges saying they don't all do cumulative. So just food for thought, it's just one thing I stood on this
Chris,
slide for me.
Is the idea of not having finals, of going to a new finals plan, is that part of the negotiation? So,
That's completely determined.
okay, so it's
externally.
not going to impact negotiations for this year?
We wouldn't be talking about it today.
I
as a
just-
negotiation. Yeah.
You know, we're all being
Yeah.
friends at the table,
Sure,
I just
sure.
kinda wanted to throw that out there.
So-
And then, I had another question for Jason. With the numbers that he had up there, or a question,
Mhm.
'cause I just like talking to him and it's been so long.
Please.
So how has it impacted our special needs kids? Like, what
There
are
you
we
go.
seeing with finals and,
Hmm.
and it's a shame Dr. Smith
Yes.
didn't leave, but, but I know that you would probably know this, as well. What are you seeing, or what kind of, or what do you know in terms of what we're talking about today?
For finals?
Yeah, what's
that? I don't know. Finals.
Finals.
Impact of finals.
Impact, on students with, IEPs, 504s.
I don't think I've heard any response different than what we've shared, just for
Okay.
the population as a whole.
Okay,
I would bet it's different, but
It could, it might be,
that would be an interesting data point to add.
Yeah.
Right
well,
down.
I do
Since
like
you're
to
doing
see,
it, Chris, just add another.
Let's play that out for a second, and just because that's why we're here, right, to talk about
Yeah.
this type of stuff. What would, if I were to have put a slide up that said, students with IEPs score much lower than everyone else on final exams, what would your response or recommendation to the administration have been? Or vice versa, they score much higher.
What would the recommendation from the administration be to help those students?
Yeah.
We shouldn't be problem solvers.
I
Well,
can actually give you a good solution because when Lindsay was in special ed, they started with how to study for finals, and they spent at least 6 weeks before you got to the finals working on, did you have all of your materials in order? And I know Matt didn't have that same experience, even with the same case manager. And so, like, that's an important lesson to learn, is how you organize yourself, especially if you've got executive function challenges. The materials were absolutely phenomenal that came out, and Lindsay uses them even as a grad student, because they were so great on how to sort your stuff and figure out what it is that you're gonna have to go back to study for your finals.
yeah, so I mean, that right there, the executive functioning, it does qualify to be a separate column in some respect, just because, but what I was thinking about as I was coming up with that question is, you know, especially for a student who struggles with executive functioning, you know, for example, that one-on-one time that you have going over the materials, et cetera, it matters so much to these students. And oftentimes what I've heard from parents is that these students, it takes a lot of time to get to that point, but once they do, it's locked in. You know, it takes a long time to get there, but then it gets locked in, and then they're able to continue to grow. So I think it's a different learning process. So I tend to think of it differently because I have kids in different pockets, and they learn differently. And one of them, you know, was extreme with speech, vision, multiple surgeries, being executive functioning, you know, like literally just a whole host of issues. And then the other day, she's like, oh, I had to create a 10-point access presentation on blah, 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 blah. I'm like, huh? You know, and so that growth is important. So I do personally like to see how they grow. I think it's just an interesting data point.
Sure.
I wanna go back to Half Wednesdays. MTSS was originally first meeting, we talked about how MTSS was gonna be these days. How's that going? Because like we hear now that they're doing SAT tutoring, are we still doing MTSS? You know, I would love to see that as a presentation from the people who are doing it. It seemed like there were a lot of requirements to qualify for MTSS, and basically if a kid needs help, they need help. I mean, we shouldn't be waiting until they've got 2 Fs to give them the help that they need. Like, I think all of us realize that, like, when you're getting a D, like, you already know you're in real trouble. Like, for somebody to reach out and go, hey, I've got your back, would really help instead of waiting to have 2 Fs.
So a couple things. We would not ever pretend to wait until the second Wednesday of each month to try and help students. MTSS is a process that is ongoing. Students meet on any given day with their champion if they are in the Tier 2 section. That does not mean that counselors, social workers, teachers, and anyone else is potentially meeting with kids who aren't in that very specific criteria all the time, just like they used to be. Right? We just started a different identification program for very specific students who are even more in need than some others based on a couple failing grades and attendance and historically low test scores. Right? So it is not accurate to say that we are doing MTSS only on early release Wednesdays. In fact, I'm not sure there's a day of the week when you would not be finding someone working with dozens of students, trying to figure out how to best support them.
So they're being pulled out of something else, or is it designated
In
time?
some
Yeah,
cases,
and like,
maybe, yeah.
And MTSS isn't, that's the name of the system.
System.
I know,
Right, it's
well,
not,
then you're,
no one,
it's not,
you
yeah.
don't do MTSS, right? So like there's no doing.
Well, if you went to the first presentation, they talked about how half Wednesdays were going to be
Yeah, so.
dedicated
As
to
an option.
Exactly,
MTSS.
so
They
all
could
of our,
have been,
exactly, so
yes.
all of our students right now have access to go see anybody in departments, right after school. So that's, you know, that's an intervention that's taking place on that Wednesday for that first half hour after school, so that is taking place. They also can go like within those early release Wednesdays, whether it's testing center, whether it's our tier 3 spaces like Excel 3 or SSC 2 on each campus, right, to see those interventionists. So I think that's what you're referring to on that early release Wednesday. So those things are robust and taking place on Wednesdays. I'd love to see more students, you know, showing up. So we've been trying to do a really good or a better job in encouraging them in that way, trying to capture them when they're there,
Yeah.
and steering them
Yeah.
into
So
those
there's
spaces.
so many fewer kids in the targeted interventions, like academic reading and arithmetic intervention, algebraic reinforcement. There's so many fewer. So like this year, there's only 11 kids at Central, I believe, in academic reading. But there's so many more kids who have reading deficits. Why are we not meeting those needs?
We're meeting those needs in different ways, right? Not every
Okay.
student wants to take an additional English class or an additional math class,
Okay,
right? So we're providing intervention in a myriad of other ways,
okay.
right? Because then when you are taking a second math class or a second English class, that means that you can't take maybe the art class or the music class. That is the reason why you come to school, right? And so those students who choose, it's not like they just fall off when we don't help them. We have different ways for us to assist those students.
So it didn't seem like it was an option back in whatever 2012, 11, 12 when my daughter came. If you had a reading score XYZ.
It was always an option, it was never mandated.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
it certainly felt
We
mandated.
talked
Like-
about it, right? We highly encourage,
Yeah,
but it has never been
so,
mandatory.
like that was incredible to have those direct targeted interventions,
agree.
the G and AR classes.
Yep.
Because you didn't have to lose, and yet you were getting interventionists and you were getting content or you were getting in-content help with reading and math, which are truly the two highest measures of if you're gonna have academic success. So like, if we could close the gap that freshman year, that's so valuable.
Agreed.
I mean, the idea that they lose an elective or what makes them come to school, like school's also a pathway, and if you can't read and do math, that's closing an awful lot of doors for people.
What do the teachers, unless it's part of the process right now, what do they think about all of this and the options, or do they not, like, is this first being brought up here, or, you know?
I have to ask a dumb question and ask what you mean by this, because we talked about MTSS and
Oh, I don't mean that, I
final
mean,
exams and a few others, so which one? Yeah.
just the optional, finals schedule,
Well, there is
We're
no
not-
optional
There's no
final
option.
schedule.
We're not talking about any
Right,
changes to the final
We're
exam.
talking about no changes, we're just trying to get some feedback about
No.
like,
No, it's being changed tomorrow.
no, what I mean
I
is.
know, right?
No, it
I
heard
know.
it was,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
Bill
Yeah.
Walsh, it was
Yeah.
Bill Walsh,
Yeah.
I know
for the video, Bill Walsh came in and
Yes,
changed
yeah.
final.
Just
That'd be
gather
great.
feedback.
Okay, so
Just gather
then
feedback.
let me rephrase my question, how did this come about then?
We just set the cadence of
Yeah.
topics to talk about. We're
This has
honestly
been a
just trying
discussion for
to
a
talk
long
to
time internally.
stakeholders.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
We set this
can
cadence like
of
a year ago.
worms, open
Well,
list.
yes,
Well, or important topic,
Yeah.
let's talk about it, and,
Yeah.
and, you know, it might cause some people some
anxiety.
angst, and you know what, really important topics often do, so we have to talk about it.
Here's what I would probably say, Lori, to that question, is how does this come
Yeah.
about? You know, having taught, I was in the classroom for 13 years. Some of my classes, I wanted to give a traditional final, some I didn't. For example, business law, I would love to have had some sort of presentation option to it. Well, you have no choice as a teacher under a structural thing. You were to give a final on a day that was gonna be 20%, and then in order to grade it, it probably had to be some sort of Scantron or some minor
Yeah.
version of that. COVID changed some things and really talked about so are there some other options? It's just so I think it's been a natural cadence of teachers to
Okay.
always question things and look at what other options are there for me as X teacher of X curriculum and X department to say, can we do other things if our course teams are on these paths? So they're bringing conversations to us, and we're talking about them. We're not looking to do anything. We're just engaging in dialogue.
And that's not what I was saying. I was just curious how it came about, because I do think that, I don't know, it's hard to say COVID had silver linings to it, right? But I think that there were some things that were brought up that we really hadn't thought about.
Right.
And if, 7 semesters works, and, and I'll just throw out, there's like senioritis is real, and so I think about that for that last final, and, how much effort is gonna go into it, I don't know. And maybe, I didn't see senioritis with my older two because, it was COVID.
You didn't know
And-
what to look for.
But they never went back to school, sorry, Bill. But I was disappointed that they didn't wanna go back, but they were so they felt set. And so it is what it is, and they're fine now, so it's fine. With my senior now, I almost said junior, I want her to have those more traditional things, but yet I do see, like, my older two are fine, they didn't have them, But my son is definitely more structured, he's used to being structured, he likes structure. Whereas my daughter in college is gaining, like, I see it coming out in spades now, it's just very visible, Whereas I feel like with my junior, or I said it again, my senior, she still needs some of that growth. She's also very young, and so I don't know, I see it working in many different ways. I guess I'm open to the discussion.
Maybe that's why
I
it's
like the idea
optional
of
for her
projects,
choice.
and I know Lindsay had them in a couple of her
Because it's
classes,
dependent
which
upon
was
the
phenomenal.
I
Yeah,
think that's all I'm trying to say is teachers,
They
to
need
answer
autonomy.
Lori's question is how does this topic hit it? Teachers have been talking about this for decades. We're not reinventing, we're not forcing, we're just engaging in a conversation with, is there a way to meet the new student's needs and the teacher's needs and the expectations of the class and assess a student's understanding of materials and skill and content and all those things in a variety of formats. That's it.
I'm sorry. So with that, what brought me, Bill, was when you said teachers are doing this. I'm concerned that with this alignment and kind of like pigeonholing and everybody needs to do it this way, is that what's best for,
I don't
right,
know.
we don't know. We're giving more flexibility to the teacher who is teaching the course to the students that they have to know how the teacher should, I believe the teacher should be allowed the bandwidth to know when to push their cohort of students and when their cohort of students is going good. But if we have these rubrics and processes, and we have to do this, and then this, and then that, and the teacher has to check off the box, are we becoming more too robotic? Where teaching is more of I believe teaching is an art form, because to be a truly good teacher, you live and breathe it.
There's a science to it though, too. There's a science to teaching too. It's an art and a science. I've always believed
Well, okay, but I think it's more of teachers are, I find teachers are more passionate, that
that.
teachers that just do the science part
Yes.
have a harder time connecting with the kids.
Mhm.
So I can see your
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
but it's like, it's gotta be that teacher that we all know, those teachers that truly affected us and our kids. They were golden.
They were good at the art side, right?
Yeah.
They were good at
Okay.
balancing it and making it look
Fair
easy.
enough,
Yeah,
right?
and I think
Fair
something that's
enough.
really important with the curriculum alignment is striking that balance, right? Because we don't want students to have a complete disparate experience in the standards, right? But the art, so no one is telling teachers how to teach that content every day,
No.
right? That's not happening in alignment, because to your point, it is about that, right? Like, I have a big personality, I was social studies, like, I'm a loud person, so my colleagues used to always shut my door, because they're like, you are so loud, but that's just me, right? Like, I would teach things probably in a different way than a colleague who maybe doesn't do group work or something like that, right? And so alignment is about making sure that those exit outcomes, that skill exit outcome, that we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum leaving District 86, how teachers are doing that, none of that is what's happening in that curriculum alignment side. So I think that that's really important, because you're right, it's that balance of making sure that we have those standards, so all students have that minimum baseline skill that they're developing, and how teachers are teaching it is that art part. And that's why we hire amazing humans, and why amazing humans work here.
Well, I'm sorry, I'll just say this and then shut up. But then, I forgot my point, I'm sorry. Go
So
ahead.
in your
Chris.
presentation, it sounded like we were trying to align units, but also the timing of units. I don't know if that was
Necessarily.
just my
Ballpark.
interpretation,
Ballpark. 2 to 4
Just
weeks.
ballpark.
just ballpark.
Yeah.
Because you have to
Because some
adapt to the kids
kids
who are in front of you.
learn, yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, and
Yeah.
like if you're pushing
There's no
more
day
the-
by day, yeah.
Cause that, like,
Yeah.
that hit in your presentation, I was like, oh, no, they can't do the same units at the same
No,
time
what
unless
we're
the-
saying is one unit, it could be designed to follow another. You follow this with that because it makes sense, because it builds on a specific skill. So I moved to this because it's a visual, but you would be hard pressed to find in this, which is the 7 areas that we're tracking as far as what alignment means, you would be hard pressed to find art in here. We are not telling people how to be great teachers as part of the curriculum alignment process. Part of our professional development efforts is to create opportunities for teachers to go in and, say, I'm really interested in group work. How can I be a better instructor with group work? And then we have a whole professional development series that may be targeting like instructional practices related to that, right? So this is the chart that we are trying to update on a regular basis. The department chairs sort of own this, right? And the 7 pieces across the top after you get past the unified ones, the overalls, right, are the areas. So no art in the program of studies, no art in fees. Textbooks the process has not changed, but we have to use similar books in common. Textbooks is even a term that we need to define, because there are a lot of courses that don't use a textbook, but a primary source, novels in English classes, etc. Grading practices are just like those are the grading scale, which is in place, the weights by category, which is in place, the late work policy, which is course team determined in place, and the relearning and reassessment practices, which are in place in most classes. So those are all we mean by that. That's not an art piece. Course objectives are the standards. Everyone needs to meet these standards in these courses. Unit alignment is, this is the order we think we should do them in. And then we actually, to your point, changed final exams, which used to be the final category there, right, to end of term assessment, which could include a project. It could include just something that they do in common, so that we can have a baseline measurement of how kids are doing in similar classes, right? So that used to say final exams, but like when Jess was leading the English group, they had a long conversation about like, wait a second, we don't really like the idea of having a common final exam, but we do like the idea of having a common end of this course assessment that measures argumentative writing, right? So we're all gonna do that. So now we can round robin around that, we can collaborate around that. So those were some of the decisions that had to do with the alignment process. Right now, inside of their collaboration meetings, that's when we hope that they can share best practices in instruction. Those are the art pieces, right? Yeah.
So, question, in terms of end of term assessments.
Yeah.
So, those, you're trying to align them so that you have a full district view, right, of.
That would be a benefit.
Ideally,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
ideally.
Yeah.
So, but for me, just personally, we have very different campuses, so the kids come into the district at very different places.
Yes.
And I understand like AP proficiency scores and all that, and they're for sure a little bit upsetting. But I think it's really important to understand growth, right? From where they started
Sure.
to where they are year over year.
Mhm.
And my concern is that end of term assessments will not tell the full story, because a student that came, a general lit class, right, sophomore year, could look different at Central than at South in terms of the range of student baseline, right?
Right, you're talking about a baseline as if we captured that, so we don't.
No, but they
Right,
could,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
in theory,
sure,
right, because kids are coming in at a different place when they walk in first to our brick and mortar,
Sure.
right? So the end of term assessment isn't, it still puts kids maybe a little bit at a disadvantage, or it shows them, it doesn't tell the whole story of that one student.
Of their growth.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's it, like tracking growth to me is just as important as showing, SAT proficiency. In fact, it tells a piece of the story that cannot be ignored,
Mhm.
right? Because you could have students that came in at a different place than many in their class
Mhm.
and could have made tremendous growth, but still not meet state standards.
And we're measuring them on the same.
And that is, that,
Well, we would never talk about a growth measure in terms of their outcome with an end of term assessment.
no, but I'm
Because
just,
we wouldn't have 2 data points, and which is why we have the MAP tests and why we have the PSATC.
no, but the end of term assessments doesn't talk about where so if you collect the data, right, and if you reported it out, you
Yeah.
could see there could be students getting, lower grades, like C's, D's, and F's, without telling the story that the student actually came in at a different place, but has made this growth to be able to be in this class, while the student is not receiving an A or B.
Sure.
The student
And I'm not
is-
sure that an end of term assessment report would be about their grades.
Okay.
I mean, the best way that we can make sure that the end of term assessments help us instructionally, right, and even curricularly, thinking about revisions, as teams meet, right, is because we have course objectives that the end of term assessments measure, right? And right now, that's not necessarily the case with all final exams. It should be, but it's not, right? So that's part of this process as well, is that when we write an end of term assessment, we are able to say 90% of our students were able to perform well on these 10 objectives that were part of our overall set of objectives for this course, right? And then we have alternate growth measures to look at the other things that are a little bit more universal in nature. You gotta be a good reader, you gotta be a good writer, you gotta be a good critical thinker. Those are parts of the growth measures that we do in addition to everything that's going on in the classics.
Chris,
So-
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I have to leave pretty soon, but for this curriculum alignment process, I sort of started paying attention in the district probably after this was already decided upon, maybe it was begun. Those 3 first columns, that is like, I'm happy you're tracking it. It tells the viewer like literally nothing about what is going to happen from here on out. Like, okay, how long has this process been going on? It seems like more and more time is going into it. Not a lot of product. There's talk about it, there's like numbers presented, but there's so little information about like what's aligned, what's happening within the classes, and when is it going to wrap up, because this process it seems like this process, in my mind, again, I'm not a teacher, could have been way more efficient. And I don't understand,
Sure.
as just a community member, it's completely befuddling to me what parts of this process are taking so long. It's not like we're reinventing a curriculum for all of these classes. If you sit at one school and you're like, we're teaching this Shakespeare novel, and we're teaching this Shakespeare novel, okay, what's good about this one, what's good about, like how, I mean.
Yeah. What you just offered would be a wonderful scenario if that's the one we were in. What we're actually in is, you have sophomores, I have sophomores, we think it's valuable for them to do these 9 things, and the other school says, no, we think it's valuable for them to do these 10 things, and none of those things are the same, right? And then we say, well, this is the current standards for 10th grade English, which one of those fit what you're doing? and neither school can match up their 10
Or teacher, don't limit it
8,
to school.
right?
It could be teachers
Oh, it
within
could be
that,
different
yeah.
teachers.
In the same building.
So what you described is an absolutely perfect scenario. That would be great if that's all we had to do. We would have been done by now,
Yeah.
right? And there was a proposal 4 years ago, 5 years ago,
More than
that department chairs, in about 5 months or less, just do it all themselves.
Okay,
Right,
so,
and that-
so now,
yeah,
so
go
now
ahead.
if the teachers are in the process of hashing this all out and they have different priorities,
Yeah.
who is in charge of making sure that the correct 9 priorities are going to the children?
Well, and me too. I mean, it's part, like when we talk about like
Project.
you know, this is why it's so complicated is because I mean this is you asked when it's going to be done, right? So it might have been done this year if COVID didn't happen, right? We slowed everything way down, so now we're looking at about 2.5 years from now, right? Everything you see here, and I apologize for the small font because it is very small, right? Is something that is being currently worked on. So when you said your child's teachers being pulled out, or multiple teachers, it might be because they're on one of these teams.
Or
Or,
two.
well,
They're at South.
Wow.
a child would have multiple teachers, but a
Yeah.
teacher may not be on multiple. Well, I guess a teacher could be on
Could be.
two
No, I
teams.
think
Yeah,
so.
but it's a small,
But
especially
to
small.
Hinsdale
Mama's
South.
point and to the teacher's point,
Yeah.
I mean, don't the teachers, I mean, my kids had different novels in their
And they
English
still will,
classes
yeah.
and stuff, like, so the idea, I mean, I looked really carefully at what's offered at South and what's offered at Central. I mean, a child at South could go through 4 years of English and never read Shakespeare. And I was baffled by that. And if that's, I hope we're not going to that because a kid at Central will have read 3 Shakespeares probably by the time they graduate. But it's gotta match the kids. And we keep saying
Well,
kids need to see themselves in the curriculum and all these things, but you've gotta look at your class and basically say, this is who I got. These aren't the right
Which
books.
is why there's a focus here on the outcomes, right? And when we talk about the actual materials, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, because English at Central was aligned grading-wise in 2017-18. Everybody was 80-20. And then, it's all, I don't know why everything shook up and now we're anywhere from 70-30 to 90-10. And, it just seems like the process it's like a snowball instead of actually being streamlined. Because, they made that decision that they wanted to be 80-20. Why did they switch the next year and then the next year and then the next year?
You're referring just to the English department at Central,
Yeah,
right?
English department at Central, they've changed 3 times since they said it. And actually they kept it for 2 years and then they've changed 3 times since. And why? And why, how is it better for a kid at South to get 70-30 in English and a kid in Central, same class, to have a 90-10?
That would be
How
the
is that
question that we're
alignment?
asking. It's not, which is why it's not going to be the case
Well,
when they're
then why don't
done.
we just say everybody just go to 70-30 or everybody go to 80-20,
That's
compromise.
That's not, well, but they're doing
It
some of that.
seems easy because
Thank
we're
you,
gonna
Jan.
get there
It's not
eventually.
that simple, you're right.
Eventually, we have to get there.
But can-
Why take so many
I
years
think the
to
different
get there?
demographics really does make a difference. And that's not something we've ever said out loud before, a
I
year
agree.
ago. And I think it's, and if I'm wrong, Chris, tell me, because I don't wanna be wrong on that. But if that is part of why we have to go through all this, I think that's part of the truth, the honest reality, whatever it is that we're trying to get at. I don't, and like someone said, I mean, I'm not interested in dancing around the whys
Yeah.
of why we
So-
have to do this.
so
I'd rather
yeah.
know, listen, we've got 2 schools, this school is like this school is like this, we
Yeah.
can't support 2 schools separately. So we have to do it singularly, so how do we do it?
But we
You're-
can't make
yeah.
everybody the same either.
Well, we can't make
Right.
everyone say,
Completely
but
different
let's
schools.
just make
Right.
sure we're
I
really,
mean,
really clear.
am I wrong?
This, well, not entirely, but yes, right, so this was not about
No, I know
just
that.
South and Central being
Yeah.
aligned. This was about inside of the same departments, inside of the
Yes.
same school, literally next door to me. The
Right.
person wasn't doing anything like I was doing, right? And that may be okay for the art of teaching, but it does not help when we want to say every student needs to have these objectives by the time they leave in this area.
That's more like college.
I'm gonna interject here because I
Sure.
feel like I'm one of the only South parents,
Uh-huh.
but I feel like some of the commentary from Central parents is really derogatory towards South. And as a candidate, I'd be
Me?
very, well, some of your comments, but be very careful about that, because almost like you're dissing the South kids, that Central kids are better, so why do we need to align with South? So just,
I never said that.
it's how I'm interpreting what you're saying. You didn't
Okay.
say it, but be careful with that, because I know there's a contentious issue in our district,
Uh-huh.
that Central is more elite than South, and I just, undertakings and tones of what you guys are talking about, as a South parent, I'm feeling it.
Okay. So just so I can make my intentions crystal clear, I absolutely don't want to offend you. But my intention and my perspective is that we need to measure growth too. Because I
I'm not
think
saying anything about
super unfair to measure only proficiency scores, SAT proficiency scores, and have that be the overlying conversation about students at either campus. I
But
think
don't
that's
group
100.
all kids in a school in the same bucket.
What do you mean?
because-
I
No,
don't,
I don't think
that's not
anybody
what I
did.
was trying to say either.
I'll leave it at that.
May I ask, that let's
Yes.
redirect, let's
Yeah.
redirect. Kat, I appreciate the point, we are doing both,
Uh-huh.
because both things are important. Okay, we do measure proficiency,
Mhm.
the state measures proficiency, and we have to report that,
Yeah.
okay? It's one of the things that we also hear the community is upset about, is
Right.
declining proficiency scores.
Mhm.
So if we don't focus on that, we are not doing the community or the kids a service, so we do have to
Mhm.
focus there. But we also are looking at growth. As we talked about in several of our meetings, we wanna make sure that and I put in that academic report, there's a big difference between cohorts
Mhm.
and growth measures, right? We can look at year over year, and we can see how things may be moving, but we also need to look at like fall to spring, right? Or freshman through, senior year. It has been unfortunate that so many of the external growth measures that most school districts use, including ours, have been disrupted over the last few years because of COVID, right? That's not an excuse, that's a reality, right? So that when I presented last week and said that the only thing we have right now is 2 years worth of junior fall to spring, right? That's because that's the only thing we have right now. We don't have freshmen 9 through 11 because there's a disruption in the scores. We can show you, right, some of the pieces, but that's not a reality. So I think we agree,
Mhm.
but I think we also have to let's be cognizant that we have to do both.
Yeah.
And it's not simple. What's on the screen? People have already left, and I apologize. Not really though. It's been a good conversation. And we designed this to go to 2:30, and here we are. But actually, each of these has gone about a half hour late already, so
Yeah.
we're almost expecting it this week. What you see here, you'll notice as I click through the next 2 slides, and I'll just do it very quickly, the font gets bigger and bigger, and that's because we're getting closer and closer to
Yeah.
to the conclusion, right? But what we're doing right now is in the left column. That is literally what's happening this year, right? So anything that's in blue is a new course that's gonna come online aligned next year, right? So what you see up there, like in English, it says English 1 and 1H. Of course, we currently have English 1 and 1H, but none of them are aligned right now, but they will be when school starts next year. If you go directly across, it says English 2 and 2H, that's the next big project for English. But at the same time, they're bringing online these options for juniors and seniors that will start in an aligned fashion. So you can look across this entire thing, right? Now we have hundreds of courses. So anything that's not in these slides is either already done or didn't need to be aligned because it was already there. But you will see it, look at the very bottom, you see those are all the prep courses, English, Algebra, US History. Those are the ones in special education that were completely separate that we talked about at our very first meeting, if you guys all remember that, several of you were there. Right, so those are ones actually, I can even say, they are actually meeting upstairs, probably 1 floor above us right now. A big team talking about a lot of those things directly.
Can I ask a quick question? Integrated algebra and geometry,
Mm-hmm.
it exists at both schools, it's very different at both schools, so what happened with that alignment? And is it,
It will be the same at both schools.
but what is that? Is
It
it
will
what,
be the sophomore,
central,
the central model.
central model,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so like,
Yeah.
how
It's
did
the
it,
post-algebra option.
okay,
I finished a year of
no,
algebra,
post-geometry.
post-geometry option, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, shoring up my algebra and geometry skills prior to algebra 2 trade, honors.
Yeah.
basically.
so one of the things that I noticed, so that class actually started at both schools the
Mhm.
same.
Yep.
And then
Well, sort of, it was intended to be the same,
it was,
yes.
for a couple of years, it
Mhm.
was the same, and then it was changed in South's building.
Yeah.
I mean, it's intriguing to watch like how these things happen, but it actually makes sense for, you know, it to be different. I mean, it does make sense. So if the teachers feel that it makes sense for that to be the class that you offer, I don't know why we're telling them that they have to do something different.
You're making the assumption that the teachers think that it makes sense. And
Well,
when
they did it.
Well, they did it, but then it changed, and now that it's changed, we're coming back to it again,
Okay.
to revisit.
So, because it currently is after algebra in this building and after geometry in the other building.
But the addition of the new course will be the same in both buildings, which will allow us to make that course the same in both buildings,
So is the new course
for just freshmen.
for just freshmen really the replacement of South's integrated algebra
It will
and
be a version of
geometry?
it, it'll serve the needs of the same students,
Okay.
because we're trying to serve the needs
But they
of
won't have
multiple
had
students.
algebra first. But I actually like the idea of what you just said, that it would serve like the integrated,
We are
because
trying
now
to
we're
meet the
forgetting
needs of
that
a wide
group of
variety of
kids.
students, right,
Yeah, we're forgetting that group of kids which
not
have
anymore,
no, they've been,
right,
Not intentionally.
yeah.
yeah, it's really hard because teachers made that decision and so like, and they're okay with switching it back the other way.
Because they can align it and we have something in place of it,
I thought
yes.
that was
Okay, but if they didn't get the thing in place of it, would it not be?
The conversation about alignment would have probably been different.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay, so on the right, you'll see what next year holds. I put a little asterisk next to the ones that are kind of a 2-year process, like World Cultures and AP Modern World, which Ms. Hurt and her team will be talking about at the board level on March 8th, 9th, the first meeting, and to rediscuss what came up at the board level 2 years ago and in our PTAC meetings in 2021. So we'll look forward to that. This is 2 years out, so like I said, the font starts to get bigger. You'll notice there's a lot of electives in here too. So we intentionally designed to go with core courses first, big courses. Then what you see on the bottom right corner, if you could see it, I'm sure the video can't capture it, all the 86 courses will be at that 100% alignment as the 26 school year begins. So the 25-26 focus will complete the process, right? That's the goal, that's the target, and that's, unless something happens to disrupt this process, that's when we will be able to stop talking about it.
Well, I think it's gonna be very exciting when that can happen, because the conversations, to your point, are you Joanna, by the way?
No.
Oh, okay. You look like someone that we traded like a couple of years ago, books or something. But I think then the conversation, to your point, some of that ends. And because I don't think that that's the intention. I think it's when you see constant change and, you know, back and forth and trying to get comfortable with something new, always. Like, the only thing that's been consistent has been the inconsistencies. And so I think once that can settle down, then some of that other stuff, you know, it just falls away. Like, it just doesn't happen anymore. But I do wanna say thank you again for trying to get people together to come and talk about it, regardless if it gets, you know, challenging or hard, because I just see a lot of value in what comes of getting people together. And I hope you continue to have these meetings, I really do. I do hope, ERWs, that's the acronym that we use in the community for Early Release Wednesdays. I do hope
We do
that-
too on all
Do?
of our documents, because I'm
see,
tired
we're
of writing
already
a lot of
aligned.
words. Yes.
You're already aligned. But I do hope that that, you know, can be eliminated sooner. I hope it is still hoping to be eliminated, but I think for the teachers and the children that, you know, more time together is better. So, I wanna say thank you.
I appreciate that, and I'm glad so many more people came today.
Yeah.
well.
Make it a
So,
smaller room, it's
Yeah,
like.
every time we're gonna go to a smaller and smaller room, and we'll
Yeah.
just feel like it's really crowded.
Or you're gonna do it online, and
Should-
you won't have to worry
Well,
about it.
actually, that was brought up earlier,
Right.
we could
I
consider
like
that.
that we're here and talking at
Me
a table.
too, I know.
Well, but it's not just, it's so everybody can join.
Exactly.
You can join, yeah.
But
Yeah.
look, he's got a camera,
No,
they
but-
can all join
But that's,
us.
but
But
that's
no,
not
but
interactive,
that's
that's
not-
just
yeah.
listening,
Right.
and as we
It's
said
a
earlier, it's
Zoom.
hard for people
Yeah.
to sometimes get out of work to come to a 1:30
Correct.
meeting.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
could engage, like you said, have it on the background,
Mhm.
chime in when they can.
And then whip around and start typing if you have to, right? Yeah, like.
We all do it, we
take
multitask when we work, I mean,
Right, 100%.
So while I'm here, and because it's a slide on our slide deck, and we're going to say to PTAC, I just want to make sure I shared this with everybody. The College Board is proposing, is not just proposing, has 4 courses in development right now that we will have to think about or potentially entertain over the next few years. None of them are ready for prime time right now, but these are the names that they are looking at: AP Business Principles, AP Anatomy and Physiology, AP African American Studies, you may have seen that one on the news, and then AP Pre-Calculus.
that's why I'm laughing.
Right.
That's right.
So the AP Pre-Calculus is probably the one that could come online the fastest. There is a lot of disagreement. Well, there's a lot of disagreement about what it replaces or what it leads to. And it originally was not designed as a course that led to AP Calculus, like BC or AB. It was designed as a culminating course for kids who were never going to get to AP, AB, or BC, right? But a lot of schools, not ours, because we haven't been part of this conversation, but like our math chairs are part of a larger, community of people talking about this. They've actually modified the pre-calc objectives for the advanced placement program so that it could be a precursor to AB or BC, right? So we have to figure out what that looks like. We don't know exactly yet, but it is a conversation that we want to have. And we just, need to even work through the idea of, is it even important to add another AP option to an already crowded AP field? And maybe it is, right? The other one I just want to bring up because it's kind of exciting, I think, so I'm already tipping my hand that I like it, right? But this idea of geometry and construction. This is a double block class with math and really an elective, but it's really woods. It's an elective arts credit. This is being done across the country. It comes out of a couple schools in Colorado that started it like over a decade ago, and now it's sort of a national phenomenon. It is an applied geometry course where you do all of the geometry that you would do, but you do it with the intent of actually building and constructing
I love
things.
that.
Kids build houses, they build mini houses, they build wood sheds, they build anything with a roof. There's a lot of geometry in a roof, right? As we've been visiting some schools. So our math and some of our tech ed teachers are looking into it. There's a training over the summer. So we're going to explore that. It's not really on the table yet, but it probably will be something we start talking about in earnest in the next year. So these are the 4 kind of that are on the horizon that are not on these lists, right? Like I wrote in here, they follow the process for policy 640. They come from the teachers to their leaders, to me and Jess and Bill, and then into the hands of PTAC, and then ultimately at the board.
What would be
Right.
interesting is have the kids in pre-calc honors take the AP pre-calc test and see how we're doing and then change the objectives. I mean, it would be an awesome, even if you could just do a sample test,
Yeah.
it would be an awesome way to,
I do not believe the test is written yet, since we only have a very, very limited framework of units. But when that comes out, maybe that's something we encourage people to do.
I have a question on AP. So I know South had AP Rise, I believe, which was a psychology class. And I was told, I think it was Tammy that told me that no one had signed up for it or it just wasn't getting
Yeah.
enough. Could something like that be brought, as, a combined school, a full-on district course for those who do have challenges that could combine a resource with executive functioning? My daughter, she got told kind of like, had we had a resource for environmental science, she would have been a great candidate because she just was so in tune with certain aspects of environmental science. And, and I never really thought about her for an AP class before. I didn't know it was an option even. But I would love to see something like that piloted at, both schools, of course, just just to give someone, something else, increase your vocabulary, increase, the way you think, et cetera. And also just giving that boost to someone who has a capacity to conceptually think something, but can't articulate it without that additional resource.
And that's a really good point, cause having a kid who has needs as well as being in AP classes, having a resource for kids who are in the AP classes that have struggles, that somebody who actually can understand where the disconnect is would be so valuable for so many kids.
I know that's just putting something more on there, but
There's also the practical consideration that it would take the place of another class. And we have a lot of students who just, and families.
you mean the resource part?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
resource.
I understand that, but
No, it's not a bad idea. It's, we talk all the time about how to open up avenues towards higher level classes. All right, let's not take any more time as people are like scattering out of here. Next community conversation, March 8th, we'll talk about earned honors credit, our pilot that we're currently running, as well as the career pathways endorsements, stuff that's going on at the state level and hopefully locally in the next year. So, appreciate you all being here, and that's that.
thank you.
Thanks all.
Congratulations
Oh,
as
thank
well as
you.
that. How dare you?
I know, right?
What's going on?
I know. No, it was an exciting opportunity, I couldn't pass it up.